All right, the time is 11:05, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. You are at the first of a three-session workshop called Maximizing Impact Through Collaborative Community Partnerships. Today is session one, Understanding Your Community and Assessing Your Ability to Meet Its Needs. My name is Evan Carl. I am the Senior Capacity Building Manager here at NYC Service out of the Mayor's Office. And we really focus on a lot of programs, but overall, I would say the mission of NYC Service is really about promoting volunteerism, engaging New Yorkers in service, and building capacity to mobilize the power of everyday residents, service year members, and volunteers to impact New York City's greatest needs. We work on a really wide array of programming, everything from overseeing service year programs like AmeriCorps to providing small funding opportunities to organizations that are utilizing volunteers to address major community needs, particularly as they relate to COVID-19. And more recently, we just developed something I hope you're all familiar with at this point, but was our neighborhood toolkit, which really focuses on providing organizations with information on how to assess their community needs, use partnerships and volunteerism to address those community needs, and then learning how to sort of evaluate their programming and share out on those stories. So we're incredibly excited today to provide this training to you all. I do have just a couple quick housekeeping notes to make sure that today goes without any problems. So first off, we are incredibly happy to announce that today's program does both have ASL interpretation available as well as closed captioning. For the ASL services, as you can see, we've assigned 2 ASL interpreters for today's event. We have Andrea Leffy and Natalie Claren. If you would like to utilize their services, you can go ahead and pin their windows for ongoing interpretation services. And just so that you're all aware, to ensure high quality interpretation, they will be switching off around every 10 to 15 minutes, and they will be sure to announce that transition beforehand so that you are able to pin the new interpreter. In addition to those services, attendees can also click the CC button at the bottom of their screen if they would like to see real-time subtitles. So if you would like to take advantage of those services, please, and if you have any questions about them, please feel free to send me a message in the chat. The final piece of housekeeping I do want to mention is that we are asking all visitors on our training today to please be sure to list their organization name in their display name. We're going to have some breakout groups later, and we want to try to make sure people are grouped according to organization as best as possible. So the way you're going to go ahead and do that is by finding sort of your face on the screen. Click the 3 dots next to your name, and there should be a button for rename. If you click that, you can go ahead and edit your display name by including your organization name in that public-facing profile. And that's really all I have for you today. I do want to just thank you all again for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to our wonderful facilitator today, Amita. Amita, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Evan. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really excited to be with all of you this morning. And thanks so much for taking the time to join us for this training. I'll take just a moment to introduce myself. My name is Amita Nagaraja. I've been working with Evan and the NYC Service team for a few years on a number of different initiatives, and really excited over this past year to have worked on this toolkit, actually a set of toolkits, one facing the nonprofit sector and another facing the corporate sector. So hopefully a lot of you have had the opportunity to actually sort of go over the toolkit. And, you know, I want to assure you that after this presentation, you will have access to both the presentation as well as the toolkit that's available on NYC Services website. So this is really just an opportunity to kind of dig in and talk through sort of the concepts in the toolkit, the flow. But, you know, luckily you'll have that as a resource to go back to and really kind of reflect on and work through with your colleagues back at your organization. So if you are here with some organizational colleagues, we're going to give you a little bit of work time to kind of work on some things and think about some things together. And if you're not, this will be a really good introduction to, how the toolkit works. And hopefully, we hope that you'll take that back and really work on it with your colleagues. It's meant to be worked on as an organization. So you really get kind of that full view and full picture of an organization when you're thinking about how you want to move forward and how you want to work in your community. So my background is I started off in CSR and corporate philanthropy and worked on grant making as well as employee volunteer programs, both in New York City, nationally and globally. For the past 5 years, I have a consulting practice and I work across sectors there as well. So I work on directly with nonprofits on strategy and program design and a number of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I also work on the funding and corporate side as well, both on grant making as well as volunteer activities. So really excited to be with all of you today and really talk this through. So let's jump in. So these are our session objectives. As a whole, the toolkit is really about providing organizations with tools and resources to help increase your impact. Primarily through partnerships and through volunteerism. So we're going to be talking about sort of phase one of that today. We're going to really be talking about understanding sort of your community and its needs and its assets to be able to really understand where your organization fits in and how it can best sort of support your community. And then we're going to be talking about, really engaging your community in a process and engaging your own organization in this process of figuring out sort of what next, how you want to move forward. And as Evan mentioned, this is a series of 3 training sessions. So this will be part 1. And the next 2 sessions will be diving deeper into really how to approach partnerships and how to approach sort of engaging volunteers. So we hope that you'll join us for the next couple of sessions as well. You'll find with the session that I'm going to be doing some of the talking, but we're also going to be building in opportunities to just take a few seconds to reflect on some things. So if you can sort of prepare yourself with maybe some pen and paper nearby, or another device that you can sort of jot things down on. What we've really found is that when you're going through these trainings, we want them to feel really actionable. So, certainly we're not going to do all of this thinking right here today. We do want you, as I said, to take it back to your organizations and sort of think through and talk through with your colleagues, but we can start the reflection and thinking today. So we do want to give you a few opportunities to reflect, to start thinking about some of the questions that we're talking about, jotting down your ideas, which will hopefully make it a little bit easier to take it back to your organization and continue that conversation. And then, as Evan said, we'll also have a breakout opportunity where you'll all get a chance to talk to each other, reflect a little bit on one of the things that we're asking you to think about, and maybe get some input from some of our colleagues on the call here on what it is that you're thinking about. So look forward to an interactive and really good session today. If you do have questions, I'll ask Evan and the other colleagues at NYC Service to sort of help me monitor the chat. If it's something that's really timely, we'll try to sort of flag that and answer that right away. And if not, we'll try to leave a few minutes at the end to sort of do some questions. Great. Does anyone have any questions before we jump in? Terrific. Let's get started. We can just go forward one slide. Are our slides frozen? Just 1 second. Maybe while we're getting to the next slide, maybe I could just ask people, I'm curious to, if you want to put in the chat, if you've had a chance to look over the toolkit or not, maybe just kind of a yes, no, just to get a sense of if people are kind of familiar with the content, or, you know, this will sort of be the first time that a lot of people are hearing this. Let's see, we've got
Sorry, folks, Evan here. I'm having a bit of technical difficulties. 1 second.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some people that have taken a look. We've got some people that are skimmed it. Some people where this will be the first time. So maybe afterwards, when we send out the slide deck, we'll also be sending out a link to the toolkit, so everybody can sort of have that as a resource. So that's good. Good to know. Let me see if I can. Okay, while Evan's working on that, I'm going to sort of start talking through a little bit. So the first part we're going to talk about is really starting to understand our community. And what we mean here is, you know, we really want to, you know, when we're thinking about how we want to have an impact, you know, on a community level, on a neighborhood level, you know, and this really is tailored to sort of what your organization is working on. So when you're talking about your community, for some organizations, you know, that might mean their immediate neighborhood. For some organizations, that might mean sort of a subpopulation within your community, within your neighborhood. Depending on the focus of your organization, when I'm talking about community, you know, just really sort of define that as, you know, the audience that you're really trying to impact and that your organization is supporting. So whatever community that might be, you know, each community really has kind of its own unique kind of culture and dynamics and history and challenges and opportunities, and really taking a deep dive and understanding what that is really critical to make sure that your organization is really tailoring its support. And if your organization has been working on these issues, working with this population for quite some time, you know, sometimes the thinking is, well, you know, we've done that. We've done a deep dive. We've been working, you know, with sort of this community for a long time. We have a really good sense of what that looks like. It's still important to sort of take a pause sometimes and, you know, take a fresh look, because things are constantly evolving and changing. You know, particularly over the past couple of years, a lot of, you know, issues that we're working on, a lot of communities that we're working with, their needs have really changed dramatically, sort of, you know, over the course of the pandemic. There's been, you know, a shifting and changing and evolution of needs. But in general, you know, that happens, you know, in life as well. So it's important to kind of really take a fresh look every once in a while as an organization, in addition to making sure that you have kind of a constant feedback loop coming in from the people that you're trying to support. So we're going to talk in this section of the session about really surfacing kind of the biggest community needs and challenges, as well as uncovering community strengths and assets, making sure that we're looking at both. You know, it's really important to understand the gaps and the needs that we want to address, but it's equally important to make sure that we really understand kind of what strengths and assets we're working with, what we can tap into, what we can leverage, who we can partner with in our community to sort of really achieve kind of our mission. You know, it's important to kind of really reflect on issues as they are now, and also understand kind of past approaches to how things have been addressed. So you're making sure that when you're thinking about new solutions or ideas for how to address a problem, that, you know, we're learning from maybe, you know, things that have gone well in the past, things that haven't gone so well in the past. And we don't have to make, you know, kind of those same decisions without the benefit of that knowledge. You know, in some ways to kind of really connect with the community and understand what's happening, or to use surveys, to have listening sessions to really address kind of gaps in knowledge. So some best practices in terms of how we want to think about engaging our communities, or we want to make sure to involve community members in conversations from the start. You know, this will really depend on exactly kind of what you're thinking about. Oh, I think we've got our slides. I think, Evan, we're on probably slide 7 here. actually 8. Thank you. So we really want to make sure that we're involving community members from the start. And this is kind of a best practice in general when you're looking at sort of thinking about doing something new or thinking about addressing things, in a different way. It's great to get, input and buy-in from the very beginning. And that way you're not only getting the benefit of their input from the beginning, but you're also getting their buy-in from the start. They feel like they're part of the process. And at the end of it, they're going to see themselves in that process and be sort of a big supporter of wherever that process lands. A lot of us might feel like, especially if your organization is working on a specific issue area, that we do have a lot of information about that issue area, maybe on sort of a larger level, maybe it's on a national level or even a city level, but it's really important to, in addition to that, make sure that you're getting kind of that local level understanding, whether it's, with the neighborhood that you're working in, or if you're working across the city, getting sort of a cross section of local level kind of perspective on how that issue is impacting people. It can really help kind of clarify what some of the issues underneath are and allow you to really target your support as an organization. It's also important to engage all relevant community stakeholders to really seek out people that you may not typically hear from. Seek out groups and populations and voices and folks that you are hearing from, but also ones that you're not hearing from, because those might be the ones that you really need to hear from and need to hear how they're receiving support, how maybe they're struggling, how maybe, current sort of state isn't sort of addressing some of their needs. So it's going to take a little bit of work to really figure out kind of who those groups are and do some talking and make sure that you're getting kind of a full perspective. And in the process, you want to make sure you're really treating the community as an equal partner in devising solutions and addressing sort of problems. These are, if this is an audience and a population that's really invested and personally impacted by how your organization is going to be operating, it's great to sort of get their perspective and see them as somebody who's really invested in this and who's got a stake in there. And it's great to be able to, as a best practice, meet with community members where possible, where they live, where they gather, to really kind of get, at that level. Obviously, that can be a challenge right now in the current environment with pandemic. But, I think figuring out what that looks like and how you can really get those perspectives, whether it's by having multiple Zoom meetings with lots of different, smaller groups and populations, or seeing if it's possible to do some in-person gathering and meeting. So why is it important for us to sort of understand needs and do a periodic needs assessment of our community, of the issues that we're working on as an organization? One of the things that we talked about is that, community needs continually evolve, due to a lot of different things. Some of them could be great things, new projects happening in the community, growth in the community, new resources coming into the community. And some of them can be challenging things like, crises, like the pandemic, other crises that are maybe hitting your community, hitting particular populations. In addition, your own organization's ability to sort of address these issues changes over time. Maybe your organization is experiencing growth. Maybe your organization is experiencing, attrition, or the focus is changing. So it's important to really do these assessments to make sure that your organization is tailoring its support to sort of the needs. Regularly assessing also allows organizations to understand the changes and kind of steer their resources to make sure they're being timely and meeting sort of current and evolving challenges. It also helps us to understand our blind spots. It's very natural. I think I have no doubt that all of you are doing incredible work in your communities, but it's really hard to sort of make sure that you know everything and that you have, a fully comprehensive view of everybody your organization touches. There's inevitably going to be some blind spots. And, even though we may not solve that, it's great to sort of periodically make an effort to kind of lift up some stones and see what's underneath, reach out sort of beyond our, usual networks, and kind of really try to dig and hear what's happening and understand sort of our community, our organization, our issue areas to help, guide us. It also helps organizations determine how to address the critical gaps that align with their missions. What we're really trying to do with the needs assessment is surface the pain points, surface the gaps, the things that are not being addressed, the things that are not working really smoothly, the things that people are struggling with. So what are those things? So we can figure out how to do that. It'll also inevitably turn up things that we're doing really well, which is fantastic, but it's important to understand where those gaps and cracks still exist. So we can feel like, we're doing kind of the best that we can to support our communities. And again, knowing what's working and what's not getting sufficient attention is important to an organization's success. The organization might determine that this is not our focal point. This is not on mission. We've sort of unearthed a crack or a gap that's not directly related to our mission, but it's still affecting the people that we serve. And maybe it's making it harder for them to take advantage of our services. So maybe that's when you look for a partner organization, or you figure out how you can sort of connect with somebody to kind of help address those gaps. So even if it's not directly related to your mission and your organization isn't going to take that on, sometimes it can still be really valuable information to sort of uncover, when there's a real need or a struggle. So getting started on how to do sort of a needs assessment of your community, you want to really think about a few things. You want to think about, what your organization already knows. Where do you have a depth of knowledge, and where might there be some blind spots? You want to understand your current network and sort of the relationships, and you want to leverage those, and you want to think about how you can leverage those to kind of create conversations and get deeper into the community. But as we mentioned, you also want to think about who you don't have in your network and who you don't currently have relationships with, and who you may have to stretch a little bit and figure out how to connect with them and how to get those perspectives. The odds are that if you're working deeply in your community, you already have a lot of ongoing dialogue and experience based on what your organization is doing, which is really important. And sometimes it's just about pausing and reflecting on that experience. We're all so in it and so busy that sometimes, we don't take a moment to sort of pause and say, what have we learned over this past year? Or we launched this new thing. Let's just think about what we've learned through that experience. What are we hearing from people that we're talking to on a regular basis? So part of the needs assessment might not be new conversations. Part of it might also be just as an organization reflecting on what we're hearing from the people we serve. What are the themes that we're seeing and hearing about? And just really kind of formalizing that and putting it on paper to say, okay, this is interesting. What are the trends? What are the things that we already know? And it's also really important to kind of understand when you're thinking about how extensive your needs assessment should be, what kind of a moment you're in right now. If this was 2 years ago or, a year and 10 months ago, and the pandemic was just emerging, that was urgent. There wasn't really a lot of time to sort of understand what was happening and really do a deep sort of dive on what the needs were. I mean, the communities you were serving probably didn't even understand their own needs related to pandemic at that moment either. So, it depends. Is there a crisis happening right now? Is this the right moment to do a needs assessment? If you do need to do one, if you're sort of in a medium crisis, maybe you need to do a quick and dirty one. But if you have a moment to pause and you're really able to do sort of the deep one where you're really digging and having those conversations, that's really important to be able to do, on a somewhat regular basis as an organization too. But, you need to think about what's happening in the moment to figure out what makes sense in that time. So I'm going to ask you to take just a couple of minutes now individually, just to jot down, think about how your organization can sort of effectively surface community needs. So we're going to boil it down to a couple of the things that we talked about. So what type of information would sort of help your organization deepen its understanding of the issues that your organization is trying to address? How do you currently reach members of the community, and what perspectives are missing right now? So how might your organization work to reach these perspectives? So take a couple of minutes just to reflect a little bit on one or two of these questions. What is your organization sort of, trying to address, and what information would be really helpful to sort of take in and understand for your organization to kind of reflect and think about how it wants to, serve its mission, even more effectively. What information would you love to have? If you could sort of at your fingertips, just say, it'd be great to have like information or data or perspective or opinions on these things. What do you feel like you would really benefit from getting? So let's take, I'm going to give everyone like a couple of minutes to sort of jot down a couple of notes, and then would love to hear from a couple of people just, what they're thinking. I have a couple of ideas you want to share in the chat. Anything that you're sort of thinking about or surfacing, feel free to share it in the chat. I'll also ask if there's a couple of people that want to just share something that they maybe jotted down, or something that was kind of interesting that if you had a moment.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Corey Wilkins. I'm the volunteer program manager with Grow NYC. Something that I wrote down was it'd be great to have data and feedback from Spanish-speaking, Cantonese, and Mandarin-speaking participants and customers from our markets and locations. Mainly, we focus on food access and sustainability, so having feedback from these participants and customers will help us strengthen our access that we're able to give them in their communities.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, to be able to really make sure that you're getting kind of that input on those services from those populations. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anyone else have one they want to share? Feel free to unmute yourself and sort of jump in. Would love to hear from one or two other people.
Hi, my name is Valentina Jones, and I'm from the Lower East Side Power Partnership. I think similar to what the other person was saying is, what is the reason that very often people of color in low-income communities don't participate actively in various town halls, that's what I call them, town hall or community meetings, that's going to dramatically impact them in that particular neighborhood?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's kind of like a precursor question, right? To like having those community conversations. What is preventing some people from joining these conversations? So what do we need to do to actually get those perspectives? So that's like a really important planning question when you're thinking about, hey, I want to talk to my community. I want to bring people together and hear their thoughts. Here's a group that we're not hearing from regularly. Why aren't they coming to those meetings? How do we address that? So yeah, that's a great one to bring up. Maybe trying to talk to some of those people and understand, is it a conflict in terms of, the typical times these meetings are held? Is it a childcare conflict? What realistically, how can we address some of those to get those perspectives? And I think that's a really good point that, it's also important to have a couple of different ways for people to give you feedback and provide input. Exclusively doing maybe community meetings, those are great. I mean, those are really important. But to also have the option of a quick survey, to also have the option of, a Zoom meeting, to have a couple of different ways. And that way, if somebody has a challenge with one of them, they're still able to sort of provide their input and share their experiences, in a different way.
Yeah, I like that survey. Because a lot of times the people that are going to be most impacted very often are not the ones that show up at a meeting that's going to determine what's going to happen in that community.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was good.
Oh,
survey.
Absolutely. One more person? Anyone else have something they jotted down?
Deborah Benders, Cooper Park Houses Resident Council President. Well, I know we promote through flyers, newsletters, our monthly meetings, but there's a big problem with age groups that are being left out of whatever programs your community may have, like the age group of 24 to 62, because you have a daycare program, you have an after school program, then you have a senior program. So the ones that are really left out from everything is that 24 to 62 age group. So we need to find a way to incorporate them to some programs. We did a survey analysis about what the tenants actually need out here. And since the onset of COVID, we've been giving out food. We've done baby day, we've given out diapers. Just here recently, we did an event, which was a food event, but also because of partnership with someone else, they were able to give me some coats to give to the tenants that really needed the coats. So, I mean, it's kind of like meeting, like talking to people that maybe might have lived here, but have moved away, or reaching out to your local restaurants. I mean, that's what I do. And I've gotten people that feed back to the community, that give back to us.
Yeah, no, that's important. If your organization is looking to serve kind of a broader demographic and serve even more people, but that's not who you're currently seeing, you know, how do you get to those populations to figure out, you know, what their needs are? And, you know, thinking about what that looks like. And sometimes, you know, it might be, you know, looking at other partners, other organizations serving those neighborhoods that maybe are working with that group to say, what are their needs? You know, are there things our organization could also be doing with them? So your conversations, when you're thinking about, you know, trying to surface community perspective, you know, might be directly with the community, but it might be with others in the community too, other organizations working in the community, you know, as you mentioned, other businesses working in the community, you know, really how to get all of that perspective. Great, thank you. We're gonna keep moving forward and we'll have some more opportunities to kind of hear from people. So some general tips to kind of ensure that you're really getting meaningful input is make sure that you're inviting people directly to give candid feedback. You know, just even telling people, we want you to be honest, makes a difference. It kind of just allows people to kind of say what's really on their mind, and making it clear you're there to listen and being open to both kind of praise, you know, for your organization, but also criticism, constructive criticism and input. If you're open to it, then you can really benefit from it. And another really important piece, if you are doing community meetings, whether they're in person, whether they're in Zoom, you know, having a strong facilitator, you know, maybe somebody from outside your organization, somebody who's kind of a neutral party, somebody who can really like navigate the conversation and not, you know, without being fully in the conversation, but make sure that everybody gets heard, everyone gets a voice, things keep moving along. You know, it'd be great if it was somebody from in the community who kind of understands all of the players, but, you know, is a little bit of a neutral party. So that's sometimes really helpful too. And these are just, you know, you'll see these in the toolkit and you'll get these slides too, but these are some, you know, some questions that you might think about for structuring your discussion with kind of community members and stakeholders. And, you know, you should absolutely add to this list, you know, what are other things your organization wants to know? But understand like what needs are being met well, what needs are not being met. You know, are community members aware of all the resources that are available to them that your organization is offering, maybe other organizations offering? You know, are there other groups that are kind of, you know, have different strategies, and are other neighborhoods and communities that are, you know, meeting these needs in a better way? And if so, how do they do it? Like, let's learn from someone else doing something similar and maybe having more success with certain pieces of it. So, you know, thinking about what questions your organization, you know, wants to answer and what would be really useful. Developing that question set is really important. So this is a starting point, but, you know, certainly we encourage you to add to this list. So the next step, you know, when we're surfacing community needs, super, super important. But another equally important piece is making sure that we understand kind of the strengths and assets and resources in a community that we can tap into to really kind of help meet what those needs are. So what is an assets-based approach? You know, it's one that really recognizes that the community, even though it's got needs and gaps and cracks and struggles, it's also got incredible strength and, you know, incredible resources that we may not even be aware of, you know, and opportunities to kind of make connections and tap into things. So it's important, you know, as an organization serving a particular, you know, target audience or community to understand what those are too. You know, your organization is likely one of those incredible resources in the community, but what are the other ones? What are the things that we can, you know, partner with and connect people to and, you know, leverage in different ways? And it really helps the community sort of, deepen its own self-awareness and, feel that pride of like, we're able to kind of use our own resources to solve some of these problems. Community organizations, tap into sort of existing assets and they help to meet those needs and expand their capacity. We're going to talk about it in one of the next sessions, but, one that jumps to mind is volunteers. Typically volunteers are from a particular community. They are an incredible resource and asset and might be able to sort of plug in a way that you haven't even envisioned yet. And that's one example. So asset mapping, so this tool is kind of a starting point to, again, it just gives you a framework to start thinking about certain things, asking yourself questions and kind of jotting some things down. So, again, this is available in the toolkit. Would definitely recommend that you complete these things with colleagues at your organization. It's great to do some of this work individually, but it's really important to get that sort of larger view. So we really hope that you take some of these resources back to your organization and do them together with your colleagues. So this is kind of a sample of the tool. So, you start out by sort of thinking about, what are you trying to accomplish? What are the boundaries of the group that you plan to serve? And what are the issues that you plan to address? And once you've sort of, defined that, do a little brainstorm of, organizations, individuals in the community that might help you sort of meet that mission. Who are people, in the community that might be able to help? Are there leaders? Are there, just people that have expressed a real interest kind of in your organization's mission? Are there institutions, and local organizations that might be able to help out and might have physical resources? Maybe they have space, maybe they have, access to some other resources. What are the government initiatives that you can tap into locally? Are there, cultural institutions that you might be able to tap into or partner with or, learn more about to kind of help you further your own mission? And what are the local associations? What are some grassroots groups? So many things have popped up, particularly over the past 2 years. Has your organization done kind of just like a map of what that looks like now? Because it's so different from what it was 2 years ago. There's so many mutual aid groups. There's so many, sort of neighbor to neighbor type groups that have, popped up and that, are really doing incredible work. So does your organization have a real understanding of those? So it can think about, how do we work with these organizations? How do we partner with them? How do we help, how do we ask them for help and support to help sort of deliver our mission? So just, again, thinking about these things. And again, these things evolve too. So it's important to do this periodically. So the next step is really thinking about, after you've brainstormed a number of, organizations and individuals, starting to rank them a little bit and say, who, I don't have the bandwidth to connect with all 50 people or 50, sort of entities on this list, but, who are the ones that might have potential, that really kind of jump out, that I might want to connect to. So really jotting those down here and then starting to sort of jot down, who are potential partners and how could a partnership with this person or this organization help my organization? And on the flip side, how could my organization help this entity? So what we're doing here is we're starting to jot down some of these thoughts that eventually would sort of, result in having a little bit of a pitch or like an introductory, like, when you make your cold call or when you send out your first email, to this potential partner, or you sit down to a meeting, doing a little bit of that thinking beforehand, what do I bring to this potential relationship? What does my organization bring? And what is my organization looking for out of this relationship? And even if you end up with just three, potential individuals, organizations, institutions to reach out to on that list, and even if only one of them sort of comes to, sort of ends up working out, that could be, a really meaningful sort of development for your organization to sort of have, a partnership, a meaningful partnership with kind of somebody new that you're able to, sort of grow and, that might help really forwarding your mission. So after we have a good sense of kind of, what the needs are in the community, what the assets are that we can tap into and think about, The next step is really to kind of understand how your organization fits into this. What is your organization's role? How do you want to kind of move forward? How do you want to think about sort of increasing your capacity? So one of the first steps and really, really critical steps here is making sure that you have support internally at your organization to sort of take this on. Sometimes when you're talking about doing something new or, changing something, and particularly when you're talking about, hey, what's working here and what's not working here, there's a tendency for some people to get a little worried and, get a little nervous and say, whoa, things are changing. As human beings, we have a natural sort of aversion to change. I mean, there's some people that love change, and there's some people that get really, really, sort of skittish about change. So sometimes when you're doing kind of a deep kind of needs assessment and saying, what are the gaps? What are the challenges? There might be people at your organization that are feeling uncomfortable about that. They might feel like, whoa, is this spotlighting something that we're doing wrong or that we're not doing well enough? Or does this mean that how we operate is going to change? So thinking about those things early on is really important to sort of ensuring success. So, making sure that you have the support of your organization when you're starting out this. So if there is resistance to kind of looking at how things are done and shining a light on trouble spots, think about how you can sort of engage your organization and really build sort of champions internally to help with this. A lot of these are very similar to how we want to make sure to build those partnerships with community early on in these conversations. We want to include people early in the process, especially those in leadership positions. You want to make sure that, your leadership is on board. You want to make sure that, key sort of colleagues in the organization are on board. If there's somebody that, is resistant, talk to them. Try to understand what the fear is behind that or what their concerns are behind that, and really kind of dig into that. There might be some valid concerns and fears, which you'll want to sort of take into account, before you sort of really dig into this. So try to understand that. And a lot of times people just need information in order to be reassured. When something's sort of dropped on you as a surprise, that doesn't feel great. But if you've been told that, hey, our organization is, taking a look at this, we want to do this so we can better serve our mission and be as effective as possible. We want you to be involved and we want your input. That's a more likely way to get people to be supportive and get people to be engaged in a process. So make sure that you're getting feedback throughout the process and, articulate any changes and decisions that you're making because of it. Make sure that there's clear roles and decision makers. Let people know, let people raise their hand if they want to be involved in those community conversations, if they want to be involved in brainstorming solutions. If people feel like they're not equipped to sort of take this on, then make sure that, we're providing training where needed. Or we talked about, bring in sort of a facilitator. If no one in the organization is feeling quite comfortable, to sort of take on those roles. Make sure that you've got clear roles and people feel comfortable with those roles. And if you do decide to implement sort of changes based on, new information, that you've gotten from the community, that you've gotten from your own organizational reflection, it shouldn't happen overnight like this. You want to make sure that it happens in stages, and it happens with pausing and with reflection, and it happens thoughtfully and intentionally. You want to make sure that there's space to kind of test new ideas, not just say, oh, we heard this from the community, we're like totally scrapping this program and doing it completely differently. There's a lot of risks to that. Start slow, pilot something, do something, try something out, get some input from the community, get some input from the organization. How did it go? Make some adjustments, make some tweaks. That's the best bet for really having, meaningful change, long-term change that's going to stick and that's going to last and that's going to be really positive. And always make sure that there's, ongoing opportunity for getting input from the community and from, internally from your organizational colleagues. So how do we sort of assess ourselves as an organization and kind of make a plan for moving forward? So one of our tools is kind of just really reflecting. It's a set of questions. And again, these questions are always starting point questions, but, we certainly encourage you to build on these. And, based on sort of the specifics of your organization, really thinking about, what other questions do we want to be able to ask here? But these questions are meant to really help you reflect on the state of your organization and what's currently in place. And again, both areas of strength and opportunity. So it's almost like, a mini version of what you just did with the community. What are the key gaps in our organization? What are the opportunities? And what are the things we're doing really well? What are the things that we can lean on and we want to keep doing exactly like we're doing them? So some of the questions here, and these are such important questions to ask yourself as an organization on a regular basis. What is our organization doing really well to address, the community's needs? And what are some of the strengths that we can really lean on in our organization and even build on? And what are some of the challenges that are preventing us from doing exactly what we want to do and really delivering on our mission? And what have we tried? Look back, and see, particularly during the past couple of years, it's been a really, interesting couple of years. And I'm sure it caused a lot of our organizations to flex and change and try new things. It's a great point right now to be able to reflect on that and say, what did we do that worked really well that we want to keep doing, even post, hopefully there'll be a post-pandemic, but the things we want to keep doing post-pandemic. And what are the things that we tried that didn't work? And do we want to scrap those or do we want to tweak them and make them better? What have we really learned? This is a real opportunity to kind of see what it is that we've learned. We might have, launched new services and programs and new ways of doing things over the past couple of years. It's really important to sort of take a pause and say, was that because we were in crisis mode and now we're going to go back to sort of how we were doing it? Or did some really interesting innovation come out of the last 2 years that we want to build on, that we want to do more of? What community needs are we not equipped to meet? Some of the things that we're hearing from our community may just not be directly relevant to our organization. We may not be able to sort of deliver on that. But, does that mean there's a gap in our capacity that we need to build up? Or does that mean we need to, connect some of our community members to other partners and maybe create bigger partnerships where we can say, we're going to address these needs and we have a wonderful partner that's going to address some of these other needs. So people can go, to you and you can be, kind of the expert resource that's guiding them to other resources. Or could we potentially meet some of those needs, with volunteers? Are there opportunities to kind of bring in, other resources, whether it's partner organizations or volunteers? So I'm going to give you guys just, a couple of minutes to kind of reflect for a moment about your organization's needs and assets. What has your organization done really well to address community needs? And what are some things that you can really lean on and build on? And are there things that kind of jump out at you that you might, be able to address through partnerships with other organizations or volunteers? Some things that your organization, isn't directly able to do, but there might be opportunities there. So just again, this can't be done in a couple of minutes and it's hard to do solo. So we do want you to take more time to do this back with your colleagues at your organization. But just to start the thinking process, want to give everyone just 2 minutes to kind of jot down some answers to these questions. And we'll hear from 1 or 2 people just to see if they had something that they want to share. And if you don't want to share your exact response, but just something that kind of surprised you or that, that you hadn't thought about in a while, that would be great to just hear that. You want to share anything that they sort of uncovered or, had an idea about thinking about this?
I'll share. This is Leanne from Henry Street Settlement. Leanne DeFabio. And one thing that came up for me was that I think we have a good sense of who key messengers are in the community and who key kind of community assets are. And I think we do a good job of utilizing them, providing them with ownership over certain areas, and really engaging them in programmatic design so that our programs are reflecting what the community needs.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like an incredible asset. And sometimes when we uncover that, we can think, are we just doing that in one area of our organization? Like, could that be something that's expanded? Can we do that with, other work that we're doing in our organization also? So sometimes it's interesting, especially if we're with a slightly bigger organization with a lot of different programs. That's why it's really important to do these conversations, with colleagues, because sometimes there's something amazing happening over here that's an incredible strength or an asset, but we realize that we're not doing it across the organization. It's not something that's consistent across the organization. So you might uncover, a strength or an asset that you're already doing within your organization, but other parts of the organization could benefit from. So that might be kind of, a really quick fix right there sometimes. Do we have one more person that wants to share something that came out of their reflection?
I'm happy to share. I'm from New York City Parks Green Thumb. I think one of our great strengths is the array of programs and workshops that we do in gardens all across the city. Of course, somewhat cut back because of the COVID pandemic, but we continue them virtually. So we really, I think, try to address those needs for gardeners and for people that are interested in growing things.
Terrific. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Great. Well, I hope that you'll all have the opportunity to kind of really look at the full set of questions and sort of think about those and reflect on those with your colleagues. So next is kind of really using that information now, what we've learned about sort of the community, new information that we might have surfaced around needs in the community, assets in the community, and then, using what we just learned from our reflection on our organization, on, again, strengths and opportunities, really starting to try to kind of envision next steps, envision the path forward. So this is one of my favorite tools in the toolkit. And it's really this idea that, to try to understand, sometimes when people say, well, what's your vision for your organization? Where do you want to be in a year? It's a really hard question. It's tough to sort of say, well, this is exactly what I want to do and exactly what, what I want, to embark on and, what I want the results to be. It's hard. So in my experience, this exercise has been really useful in kind of just boiling it down to be able to give you a little bit of quick and dirty information on, where there might be opportunities to kind of evolve and opportunities to kind of change. Let's go to the next slide. So it's a visioning exercise that asks you, there's two parts to it. The first part is individual, where you write down 10 honest words to describe the current state of your organization. And you could tweak this question for exactly what you're looking to do. So for here, we've said, what are 10 honest words to describe our organization's current approach to how we address community needs? So you would think about it from all different perspectives. What would our stakeholders say? What would our community say? What would our colleagues internally say? What would our volunteers say? What are the clients we serve? What would they say? What would our funders say? Think about like all different stakeholders and just 10 honest words for how they would describe how your organization addresses community needs or how your organization delivers on its mission. So, I expect there would be a lot of terrific words on there, really, really positive words, because all of you are doing great work, But if we're being really honest, there's probably also some words on there, describing the places where we struggle. So it might say, impactful and passionate and, it might say those things, but it might also say disorganized and slow, or, it really depends on your organization. But, these words will just give a quick snapshot of kind of how your organization might be operating right now. So after you do that, you take a couple of minutes to do the exact same exercise, but think about a year from now, what you would love all of those same people, including yourself, to be saying about your organization? How would you like people to describe your organization's approach to serving the community? If you ask them next January, what would you like them to say? What would those words be? Maybe it would be some of the same words from the list, because you certainly still want to be impactful and passionate and, you know, the things that came out on part one of that list. But what else would it say? And then you really reflect on the list. And sometimes it's very clear. You see like, wow, that's the thing that we need to do. That's the thing that we need to evolve. If we go to the next slide, you know, what's really nice is when you do this individually with colleagues at your organization and you come together, it's a really interesting part of the conversation to see if you had similar themes that came out. You know, did everybody sort of say, hey, you know, we're doing great work, but we're really bad at communicating. You know, we struggle with communication. And a year from now, everybody wants to see, you know, really clear, crisp communications that share what it is that you do and the impact of your work. You know, or are there different things that all of you are seeing? You know, maybe from your part of the organization, you're seeing some things that look really strong, but from where someone else sits, you know, to them, they want to work on something completely different. So sometimes it can really bubble up just some quick themes like, wow, that's really exactly what we need to do, you know, right? That's what we need to work on. We all see it. Whereas sometimes it might help just communicate across different parts of the organization. It might give you like an aha moment, like, wow, I see us as really great communicators, but you see us as really poor communicators. Why is that? You know, maybe our part of the organization is doing a really great job at communicating, but maybe this other part of the organization is really struggling with it. You know, so let's figure that out. So, you know, it's usually an exercise when done with a number of colleagues that have different perspectives across the organization that can be really, really illuminating and really useful in figuring out what it is that your organization wants to kind of, you know, work on and think about transforming. So, you know, this is really best done in sort of a larger group. So we're not going to do this exercise right now, but I really, really encourage you to sort of, as part of the process, do this exercise at your organization. And it's sort of still the beginning of the year, and it's kind of a nice time to kind of do it and reflect. And, you know, would love, maybe you guys can share back with NYC Service kind of how that exercise went, and if there were some good moments that came out of it. And finally, of course, the last step is to kind of really reflect on the results and discuss as a group. And what are the differences that you see? And are there some clear indicators? And, you know, what you want to do with that information going forward, how you use that to create kind of your vision for what you really want to work on as an organization, and how you might want to, you know, evolve. So this is, you know, will be there for your reference, and this is also in the toolkit, but we're going to hope that you have a chance to go back and do this with your organizations. So now is when we sort of, you know, plan to sort of increase our organizational capacity. We have a sense now of what the community needs and what it, you know, the resources that exist there. We have a sense of, in terms of our own organization, what we're doing well, what we need to do a bit better, where we want to think about it. We've used that information to sort of create a little bit of a vision. That 10-word exercise is meant to sort of lead you to sort of a vision for what we need to do and what we want to evolve and change. So now that we have that, we need to plan for that, right? We need to sort of pause and kind of create a plan. Like, how are we going to make that happen? How are we going to prepare our organization to kind of, you know, evolve and meet these needs in a little bit of a different way? So one of the tools that we have in the toolkit is a how might we exercise. Sometimes it's, you know, it's a really big question. Okay, what do we do now? You know, that's a lot. It's a lot to sort of think about. So this is one kind of, you know, tool to be able to think about this. How might we sort of approach, you know, frame some open questions that kind of help start kind of a brainstorm and an ideation that help think about what those next steps might be. So how do we craft a good how might we question? So, you know, an example of a question, how might we get volunteers to return? let's say one of the things that we see, when we do all of that reflection is, we're great at getting volunteers in the door, but, they're not sticking with us. And, it's creating a lot more work at the organization. We're not getting as much sort of value as we need from our volunteers. So, how do we get them to return? So that might be a little bit too broad a question, because that's a big question. So then you might try to narrow it, and it might be, how could we provide food and refreshments for volunteers at our project sites so they're going to be encouraged to participate again? That might be really too narrow. That's highly, highly specific. So you probably want to go somewhere in the middle where you're crafting kind of a question that's narrow enough that you can come up with some very specific solutions, but that has enough broadness to it that it allows people to brainstorm and ideate. So maybe something like, how might we create a welcoming environment that'll encourage volunteers to return? Or, what types of incentives do we want to build for volunteers to return? So thinking about how to land on kind of a good question. So, you would start by kind of reflecting on the whole process up until now and thinking about sort of those themes that emerged. And then we would think about what are the specific challenges that we want to tackle and frame a few how might we questions. And then for each question, you want to take the opportunity to brainstorm some potential solutions that your organization might want to explore, and then discuss kind of what seems most impactful and what's feasible. We might have some great solutions that just aren't realistic, because of budget, because of timing, because of capacity. So we also want to narrow it down by what's feasible. What can we do? So that's kind of the basic exercise. So we'd like to give you guys an opportunity to do this exercise. Obviously it'll be a little bit different because you haven't had the benefit of going through the full process yet of sort of the community reflection, the org reflection, the visioning exercise. But, we had a feeling that most of you know your organizations pretty well, that you could probably frame a couple of good how might we questions that you could kind of think about. So on the next slide, we're going to ask you we're going to put you into breakout rooms. The groups won't be too large. And if you're with your own organization, we're going to try to pair you with your organization so you can actually do some of this work together. But otherwise, you'll be in a group with some people from other organizations and you'll get to hear a little bit about what they're thinking. So take a couple of minutes and review your notes or, from the earlier reflection activities, but just pick one theme or challenge that you think your organization needs to work on and create one how might we question. What's one question that you kind of want to just think about, as an organization on how you can best serve the community, and brainstorm 2 to 3 kind of ideas, or answers to that how might we question. And then in your group, we're going to do a quick round robin and share. I'd like you to share your name, your organization, your how might we question, and maybe one of your ideas and your responses to it. And let's get group feedback, just a 1-minute kind of feedback on how you might sharpen your how might we question. Like, is it a good question, or do you need, does it need a little bit, sort of massaging to get to be, a really useful question? And then have the group do a 1-minute brainstorm on each person's question to share any ideas, solutions, or responses they might have. So we're going to ask everyone to keep kind of, when they share their question, I know it's going to be tempting to give a lot of background and context, and unfortunately we don't have the time for that. So try to just kind of narrow it and have it be kind of a a question that people can understand easily. And let's get a little bit of feedback from our colleagues. And it might also be interesting just to hear what other organizations are thinking about. What are their how might we questions? Is there a lot of overlap? Or is there maybe somebody who has the exact same question you do that you want to trade contact information with and brainstorm about together? That might be something that maybe comes out of it. So while we are putting you in breakouts, just start taking a moment to individually write down your own how might we question that you want to share with the group. And we'll ask you to do that. So we'll bring you back, probably have about, I'd say 12 or 13 minutes. So we'll do, we just ask that everybody make, a quick round robin so everybody gets their opportunity to share their question and have like a 1-minute brainstorm on people's thoughts on their question. And Evan, myself, and Megan, I think, are going to be, we'll pop in and out of breakout rooms also to just hear how things are going and help anyone if anyone's stuck. And welcome back. Do we have everyone back with us? I think so, or slowly coming back. Thanks, everyone. I was able to get into 2 breakout rooms where we had some good conversations. I hope that most people were able to share and you guys were able to do a little bit of brainstorming and getting to know each other. I always know we always want more time for that, but anyone want to just report back any moments or anything that kind of came out of it, a great idea that you walked away with, just someone that you want to connect with after, just was a good opportunity to kind of frame your question and just get it out there. Anybody want to just 1 or 2 kind of quick comments or reflections about the breakout time?
I know getting volunteers to speak up is hard, so I'll go for it. I thought in my group we had some interesting suggestions, but for me, one takeaway was, I'll generalize this, was for purposes of focusing in on volunteers that might have a very specific interest in gardening, to look at nearby schools, and we're a citywide organization, so this is very relevant, that colleges or universities or high schools that focus in on related subjects to gardening for young people that might have a real interest in really diving in.
Interesting. Yeah, I think tapping into local organizations, educational organizations, schools that that might have clubs or might have related
majors, programs.
Right?
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Anyone else? Do we have one more brave person who wants to share something?
I can share from our breakout group. I'm Miss Brandon from Bronx Parent Housing Network. Amita, you gave me a great idea in terms of possibly reach out to clients to join on board, because how might we question is how to build a more robust board to help with private fundraising and connecting with the community.
Yeah. Is there anyone on the call that has a board that also includes a client or sort of that perspective? Okay, if somebody is also exploring something similar, and wants to make a connection there, let us know. Great. Well, thank you all for sort of, framing those and participating and having a little bit of a chance to kind of connect with each other. Hopefully that was useful. Okay, if we go to our next slide. So, the question now is really, what do we do next? How do we, now that we've sort of defined what some of these unmet needs are and, where our organization wants to go and what we might want to do, we need to think about how we build our organization's capacity in some areas to kind of really tackle some of these things. Some key ways to build organizational ability to increase impact are partnerships. Another is through volunteers. And, there's of course other avenues as well, kind of, board seats, external perspectives, through advisors or subject matter experts, other sources to really be able to, sort of build out the capacity of our organization. What we will be talking about in our next couple of sessions are the first 2. We're going to be talking about partnerships and really dig in a little bit more about how to embark on a successful partnership, how to think about it, how to approach it, and how to make sure that it kind of works in both directions. And we're also going to be talking about volunteers, how we really kind of think about, structuring sort of volunteerism and how we manage volunteerism to make sure that we're getting, a lot of value for our organization while also thinking about sort of the volunteer experience and making sure it's, again, a positive experience for everybody involved. So it was really, really nice to be with all of you today. And I hope that many of you join us for the next couple of sessions. We have a minute left if anybody wants to chime in with a question. that happy to answer, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. It was really nice to go through this with you. Really excited for all of you to kind of